Most people don't realize how much their allergists do outside of the exam room, from speaking up in Washington to funding new research and creating free patient resources. The American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, which also goes by the college, plays a big role in helping patients get better care. That's why we're joined by Dr. James Tracy, the new president of the college. Today, we are going behind the scenes to learn what they do, how Dr. Tracy became the president, and what changes might be coming up for patients and doctors alike. This episode is made in partnership with the Allergy and Asthma Network. Any mentions of brands is for informational purposes only and not an endorsement. Now let's get into it.
You're listening to The Itch, a podcast exploring all things allergy, asthma, and immunology.
Today we have Dr. Tracy on, and he is the current president of the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. And this is a getting to know you episode and an episode where we talk about the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology and all the resources they provide and the goals of what Dr. Tracy is going to bring to the college this year during his presidency. So Dr. Tracy, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey into becoming an allergist?
Sure. Well, first of all, Kortney and Dr. Gupta, thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. My journey's been kind of non-traditional. I didn't start out wanting to be an allergist. My original plan, although I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I was young, started out as family practice. I knew in my third year medical school, on my first rotation, which would happen to be pediatrics, that I kind of liked pediatrics. The patients got well where the adults didn't ever seem to get well, and I found myself really called to that. And I was in the Air Force, and so I was on an Air Force scholarship, and I'm also a DO. So I had the advantage after finishing medical school of doing a rotating internship, which is pretty different than general MD track. And so I did a full year as a rotating intern in Maine, and then I actually did not get selected for an Air Force family practice residency, which turned out to be one of the greatest blessings of my life. It's funny how those things happen. And so I pivoted to pediatrics, and I did my residency in California at Travis Air Force Base. And my first assignment out of training was in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So I practiced general pediatrics in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and it was an extremely powerful experience. I did a lot of fun things. I flew helicopters. I've actually delivered 55 babies over the years, which I'm proud to say is more than most allergists. And at that point, I kind of decided I was kind of drawn to a couple of areas. One was cardiology and the other was allergy. For a variety of reasons, I chose allergy and immunology. So I did my allergy training at Wilford Hall Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, and I met some of the finest people I've ever met in my life. I've really learned how to learn, learned how to teach, learned how to lead, and certainly manage resources through those experiences. Then they sent me to Omaha, which is where I currently reside. I was at Offutt Air Force Base, which at the time was the headquarters of Strategic Air Command. And there I practiced allergy for 2 years before I separated in 1995 and joined the practice where I'm at right now. We are a very large single specialty group. I think at the moment we have 8 physician providers, and I think we have 6 advanced practice providers. We have 19 satellites around the state, and really both in Iowa and in Nebraska. So Omaha sits right on the border. And I actually have a very robust Iowa presence too. And I've been doing that for a long time. I've been in Omaha for 30 years. So I've been doing this probably for over 25. And so it's been quite a journey. I've got a very diverse mixture of urban, suburban, and rural practices. I have one clinic that I actually fly my airplane to. I used to go once a month, and now I kind of go for 2 days every other month. And that's a 2.5-hour flight in the middle of ranch land. I've been doing that for, 30 years almost. A lot of fun. Our practice has definitely evolved over the years. Most allergy immunology practices are kind of a little more what I call meat and potato asthma and allergies. We started out as a primary immunodeficiency clinic very early on. And so I have a very diverse background. And when I trained, one of my teachers in San Antonio, a gentleman named Ernie Charlesworth, he was triple boarded in dermatology, internal medicine, and allergy. And so I'm still the skin guy in our practice. But yeah, so I've been here. I was the managing partner for over 15 years. I'm no longer the managing partner. I kind of run the place. And I've gradually been able to turn that over to others. But yeah, that's my story.
That's wonderful. So the one thing that I wanted to go back to was that you're flying yourself to clinics. So you're a pilot.
Yes.
That's great. So Dr. Tracy, what made you want to take a leadership position in the American College of Allergy, Asthma, Immunology?
Well, so in addition to my regular day job, which is kind of seeing patients, I really had 2 areas of interest. The first is really insect allergy. It's been almost started as a hobby. in San Antonio. And there we have fire ants. And I actually have a fairly robust CV in that area. This year I finished writing my part of the new Middleton. Practice parameters are coming out. I mean, it's kind of been a blast. So I've been able to keep my finger in that for my entire career. But my other real passion was advocacy. I really believe very, very strongly in the community-based allergist. And it's a hard road to follow. There's a lot of competition from people trying to not pay you to people who think they're allergists but really aren't. It's been a challenge. And I found that it was a good way to take care of my patients too. So that blending thing just kind of kept going. As far as the leadership, honestly, Dr. G, it kind of just happened. I never really aspired to it. It turns out that I'm pretty good at building things. And so I like to build things. And it's not just in medicine, I do it in lots of things. In addition to my role as the president of the college, I'm also the president of what's called the Consortium of Independent Immunology Clinics. And there it's a community based, it really deals more with the business of allergies. It started out as a GPO, but it turns out that organizationally, I'm pretty good at finding people. I call it connecting the dots and ultimately building something with that. So I've done that, but I also do it with philanthropy. I'm a trustee for a $63 million trust fund. I build community organizational stuff. It just turns out that that's kind of in my DNA, so to speak. So I like that. So again, it just so happens that I wouldn't say I stumbled into it, but I kind of stumbled into it.
So I think that for a lot of younger allergists that might be listening, understanding that path to getting into a leadership position in the college is always interesting. And I think it starts with, as you said, advocacy and taking initiative and wanting to be involved, and slowly then making those connections and then getting to a point where then you're put into a leadership position. And that's what it sounds like you've done and how you've gotten to this pivotal position in your career.
Well, I will say the college does it, and to be fair, the academy does it too. I'm not exactly sure how they do it. But speaking for the college, we actually have it's called the Leadership Summit. In fact, we just had it 2 weeks ago. And what we do is we try to identify and cultivate individuals who have the potential to lead. Some people, it kind of comes naturally, and some people they kind of need a little of encouragement and coaxed. But then you need the tools, what I call the tactics of leadership. So the goal or strategic goal might be just say the president of the college, or as an example. But you need the tactics from a managerial standpoint along the way to build that. And in most organizations like ours, it really starts at the committee level. And so getting involved at the committee level, and if you do a good job, you'll be identified as having something. And then so in the college, again, a little different than the academy. The committees are quite large. The colleges are actually quite small. And so it's hard to hide. If you do your job, you're going to get noticed. And if you want to, you can become vice chair and ultimately chair. It's a pretty interesting way to do it. And then there's several criteria, but once you're a fellow for 3 years, you become eligible for the Board of Regents. And you can either self-nominate, or you can, in most cases, somebody else nominates you or recognizes that. That's a 3-year stint. That's really a lot of fun. And I always like to stress to these young folks that this is where your friends for life are. I used to think that my college buddies would be my friends, but it turns out it's my allergies, people that I've known for years. And if you think about it, for 30 years, I've had 60 meetings if I've gone to both the academy and the college, and you get to know people. I mean, that's how I got to meet you. This adds richness to our life that it's difficult to replicate. And so when you're involved with leadership, it's more than just leading, it's part of your relationships. And if you're really good at it, people will recognize that. For me, it's an absolute blessing. I never really sought it. It kind of came to me, but clearly I had something that was desirable. I also find in addition to being very grateful for what I have, I'm also fairly humble about it. I told somebody early on, when I was 16 years old, if I had written a book about what I wanted to be when I grow up, I couldn't have written a better book. My dad is 96, he's still alive. And he doesn't hear very well, but he does understand what I do. So he just tells me I should retire. So I said, not yet.
Oh, that's sweet. That's awesome. So, going back to the college, I would say that we've heard that it's a great place for clinicians to connect. And can you talk a little bit about the patient resources that the college provides?
Sure. So the college website, which is actually websites are constantly being modified. Ours is no exception. But basically, it's broadly broken down into sort of two sides. One is for the members, and the other is for the patients. And both sections, but in particular on the patient side, is really directed towards a couple of things. There's a huge array of teaching resources at really for skin, for asthma, for the whole spectrum. Food allergy right now is a big hot topic. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, as we all know. And so it is a vetted, legitimate, trusted source for patient information on a whole variety of topics. Some of these are video, many of them are written, and there's a whole array of that. And I don't know how many hundreds there are, but there are hundreds. The other part that's on there is Find an Allergist, which is a very useful tool. And so as a patient, you can plug in your zip code or your city, and it's going to pull up what I call real vetted allergists and immunologists. There's a lot of people out there that kind of call themselves allergists and immunologists. They're not board certified, fellowship trained allergists. This is a nice way to get a trusted provider resource. So basically, the educational resources are huge. Finding an allergist exceptional. Those are really the biggest things that on the website and what the college has to offer. We could do a deep dive into all that. You almost kind of have to stumble through it a little bit, but it's pretty easy to navigate once you get in there. And actually making it user friendly is really one of the things we're continuously updating that part. You just can't sit on it. It's like social media. This stuff changes sometimes by the hour. When new stuff comes up, again, in the area of foods, as we all know, there is so much out there right now that's brand new that just wasn't there 10 years ago, or heck, even 5 years ago. And there's more to come. You kind of got to stay on it and be able to believe that this isn't, misinformation, for lack of a better word.
As a patient, I find the website really useful because I don't trust everything I read on the internet. There's so much. And now with AI just kind of populating answers when you do a Google search, you don't know if you can fully trust where it's pulling those answers. So generally, I go to the college because I know it is the allergist website. So it's probably going to be very accurate. So I trust it as my first place and also as a place I cross-reference to make sure that I'm understanding everything. There is something that you've brought up a couple of times that I would love to dig into, and that's the role of the allergist, because you mentioned that some doctors say that they're allergists, but they're not, and also protecting allergists from other doctors or just like doctors playing allergists. So can we talk about that a little bit? Because I'm intrigued.
You can put a shingle on your door and say anything. So the barriers or the boundaries historically are actually at the hospital accreditation level. Well, since we're mostly outpatient nowadays, I can put really anything. I mean, I could stop being an allergist and do Botox, put dermatology limited Botox or something on my door. I have no formal training for that. So you can do that with allergy too. And so you get somebody who maybe went to and these are around a 2 or 3 day course on how to skin test. And now they think that because they can skin test, that makes them an allergist. And so then they put allergists on their door. Well, for those of us who've been doing this for a while, I'm sure Dr. G can attest, it's not as easy as it seems. Some things are pretty straightforward, but not everything. And we also recognize that this is something that's missed by a lot of people, that just because you have a positive test doesn't absolutely make you allergic. And that's missed a lot in the lay world and people who don't understand the meaning or they can't place allergy testing into context. Whether they do blood tests, any physician can do that, or skin testing. Yeah, it's pretty easy to do that and create the false impression. And I'm not even saying they're bad, just saying that they're definitely not board certified. And they tend to be a little quick to do the shots because that becomes a profit center, which doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. Doesn't mean it's not indicated, but they're pretty quick to the draw. Where an allergist immunologist places context both with testing, what I call a rank order of therapies, with avoidance, medication, and allergy shots, kind of in that order. And there's definitely overlaps. I mean, you can have medicines and shots, but that's kind of the order. Now, obviously, there's a time when you might go right to shots for if there's a mitigating circumstances. But as I tell all my students over the years, the cornerstone of allergy therapy is really avoidance, if possible. Some things are avoidable, some things aren't. Sometimes it's a mix. You do the best you can. And if avoidance isn't possible or isn't practical, then you move to the next level, or what I call tier. Allergists understand that. And then what allergists are really good at is because most allergic disease, and Kortney, you brought this up yourself, it's not one thing. Now, you had the allergic march, but a lot of people have a blending of skin problems, respiratory problems, asthma, the whole myriad. It's not one and done thing. And so the allergist is trained to place all of those things into context and come up with a plan, but also stay abreast of what's new out there. That's really a big deal. I tell people, basically, when I started taking care of asthma, I had theophylline. Dr. G, have you heard of suspirin?
I actually have, but I've never used it, obviously.
Well, it's not in the market anymore. Susferin was a long-acting epinephrine. It had a little ampule, so you click it, but it basically was a 3-hour epidose. And that was how you would send patients from the ER home, but buying enough time for their prednisone to kick in. Well, now the amount of prednisone that I use compared to 15 years ago is, in fact, as an allergist, you can almost gauge the quality of your work by the number of prednisone prescriptions that you write. In our practice, we did a lot of intravenous Solu-Medrol early on. It's been months. And so I can't tell you the last time one of my patients got admitted, honestly, which is not to say they haven't, but I don't know about it. That's a heck of a record. And most allergists do that. The people who don't do that, who aren't allergists, that's not going to happen, or something's going to slip through the cracks. There's a lot of rare diseases out there, from mast cell disease, HAE, for example. God, that slipped through the cracks for generations, and so that's not going to get picked up. It's going to get treated like it's just a regular tummy ache or swollen lip by a non-boarded allergist. So that's kind of the difference, Kortney. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a lot of years of training and experience that people don't have, and they might just want to treat one certain aspect. And like you said, Dr. Tracy, one thing that you mentioned, you wanted to be in family practice. Well, I feel like we're kind of like the family practice of allergic disease, right? We treat from head to toe, and we understand how everything goes together and how to manage all of those things, and when to refer out and when to co-manage conditions. And so I think that that's a really important concept that a lot of doctors that haven't been through proper allergy immunology training may miss.
Yeah, and you brought out a really, really important point there. We actually, there are some exceptions, but the majority of us take care of both adults and children. So people ask, so what's your percentage? Well, for me, I haven't done the demographics lately, but a few years back, what I discovered, it kind of depended on the time of the year. I used to joke that in the spring in Nebraska, I mean, I could have a whole day of 5 to 7 year olds with eye symptoms because of the tree pollen and early grass season. But in the winter, I tend to get more sinusy stuff, so it tends to lean more towards adults. But that's very unique. If you take an internal medicine track, you're going to be taking care of mostly adult in whatever you're doing. Most people who take a pediatric track can subspecialize to do something just with kids. Even if you look at from an ACGME kind of standpoint, we're looked at differently. It's a very unique world that we live in as allergists and clinical immunologists.
Absolutely. And so now I want to kind of shift and talk about what is your vision for the college this year? I think every president takes on a special project or an angle that they really want to focus on. What is that for you this year?
I felt very strongly when I took this over that the work that my two preceding presidents, Dr. Kathleen May and Dr. Galen Marshall, Kathleen's big deal was really connecting basically at the teaching level between community allergists teaching medical students and residents, particularly in areas that don't have a fellowship training program. And so I kind of wanted to keep that initiative going. Dr. Marshall's was a bit more complicated. It was basically tying in community-based clinicians with academic researchers on what is called the CAPER project. He and I talked a lot about this. That wasn't going to just be a one-year gig. In order to make that successful, he was going to need a little bit of push from me too. So the first thing, when I have something that's good, like I said, I want to build things or help build it. I don't need to take any of the credit, but I wanted to keep building it. So that was my first thing. The second thing is I've always been, I wouldn't call it a penchant, but I've recognized that AI is playing a bigger and bigger role in what we do. How that actually integrates into my personal practice is a work in progress, frankly. I'm not sure that AI is going to replace us like some people are worried, but I think that as a physician, if you don't at least embrace AI a little bit, you're going to get left in dust. So even at my level of practice, I try to stay right. My third thing was what I refer to as servant leadership, and I kind of alluded to that before. I really believe that servant leadership is really leadership where you're not really doing it for recognition. You're doing it for the betterment of mankind, or in our case, our patients, but also my colleagues and for my community. For example, I told you about flying. So when I go up there, everybody knows me, everybody. I get invited to their houses. I took my grandkids on a thing down the river up there. I went to church with them. They all knew who I was. And you become a part of the community. In one of my other clinics, which is rural, I've actually gone out and combined corn and soybeans. It's useful as an allergist to kind of get your fingers dirty. So, but not really looking for recognition. So servant leadership. The fourth, and probably there'll be a lot more on this. This will come out here in let's see, maybe the end of next month. Yeah, it'll come out over Memorial Day. So the problem we really have in the specialty is, and you've kind of alluded to it, it takes a long time to build an allergist. I have 29 9 years of formal education. That's a long time. It's also why some people want to skip the path and just put their shingle out too. We have a workforce problem. The amount of an incidence of allergic disease continues to go up, and the pool of allergists is not. It's static at best. Last year in the United States, actually in North America, I think it's North America, but definitely the US, of the individuals, 91 individuals applied for fellowship programs, and there was not a slot. 91. And so that means you have 91 people who want to do the job, but there's just no place for them for whatever reason. The college, we've got a process in place, which will be publicized really in May on our approach to kind of help that along. But it's a workforce problem. So those first three things are kind of what I'm working on now. The last one, I wouldn't call it a done deal, but it's big enough that it has to be voted on by the board of directors or board of regents in June. But we'll come out publicly at the end of May. Basically, it's a way to help with fellowship training programs. More on that to come. But that's ultimately going to be my legacy, that piece.
That sounds amazing.
It's pretty cool. I told you I like to build things. And so when it comes out, it's going to be pretty big. The college had a program years ago called the Acorn Project. And basically, it was a method at the time sponsored by industry to fund fellowship slots. It was in place about 10 years. It kind of went away. It was done, but the original idea was from Dr. Michael Blaze. And it just kind of went away for a variety of reasons, mostly funding. Ours is going to look something like that. But instead of going to industry, we're just going to do it internally. And hopefully, we'll move forward. The idea came to me originally from Dr. Alan Meadows. He said, "Have you thought about this?" And we kind of tossed it around. And basically, I decided I was going to push full head with this thing because I didn't feel like I wanted to wait a year. And so I had to convince a lot of people why this was valuable and how we could fund it, why we should fund it. And then I pulled together a team, and the team is led by Maureen Peterson. I don't know if you've ever met her, but she is a retired Army allergist, and she is a force to be reckoned with. I'm pretty good at picking out and building teams, as I mentioned. I called her up one day and I said, "Maureen, this is kind of my ideal. What do you think?" And she said, "Sounds good," very enthusiastic. And I said, "How would you like to lead it?" And she said, "Absolutely." And I said, "This is going to be very aggressive. You've got 6 weeks to come up with a framework, rebrand it, and a name." Because when I went to the Academy meeting in February or March or whenever it was, I wanted to be able to kind of explain the program to industry for a lot of reasons. Not that I was looking for money, but I wanted to gauge their interest and sort of see and maybe eventually we'll be able to build industry into this program. And she did it. We probably will have a framework letter that goes out to program directors probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks so they can know that this is coming. And it'll be competitive. But again, more on that to come. But I'm pretty excited.
That's wonderful, making sure that there's enough people to treat all of the patients that we need to treat, especially with global warming, climate change, and all of the increase in allergy we see there. And then obviously we've seen food allergy, mast cell disease, I feel like is increasing. So there's just so much need for our subspecialty. That's great that you're putting so many resources towards that. I love all of your initiatives. I love that you're keeping what the past presidents have wanted to do going, and that AI is something that I'm also very interested in. There's a group of us that are writing a paper right now on allergy and AI. So we'll definitely share that with you once it's done. But yeah, I think that all of these initiatives are much needed and awesome. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share and ideas on how people can become involved with the college if they're interested, whether it's patients or clinicians?
Well, there's two quick ones. So the college is unique in that, remember I mentioned advocacy was one of my passions. I've been doing that for 30 years. And in a few weeks, I'll go to Capitol Hill. What the college does, and it's the only one game in town that does this, we partner with Allergy Asthma Network very closely. When we go to Capitol Hill, we go with patients. From a patient standpoint, getting involved with AAN is probably a big deal and an opportunity to meet your representatives. You can actually make a difference at the legislative and access there. And I have learned over the years, I can go into a room and I carry a little bit of cachet because I'm the president. But I'll tell you, you bring a patient like yourself, Kortney, into a senator's or a congressman's office, and it's a different feel. You can go places that I can't go. You can say things that I can't say. If you pair up with somebody like myself, which is how we do it, you can get people's attention. There is no more powerful advocate in the universe than a guilty mother. I'll just tell you, moms tend to blame themselves for everything. And it's obviously not true, but that's how they look at it. I mean, they're babies. You take that highly motivated, engaged There's fathers too that go there, but it's striking. So that's the first thing. The other thing, which I just sort of wanted to touch on, and my presidential plenary will also touch on this too, is the future. We're going to see a catastrophic, huge leap technologically in the next 25 years. Up to this point, our medications, it's been a fairly steep slope. In our space, it started with omalizumab over 20 years ago, but with monoclonals, but that's going to change. So we're going to still have monoclonals, but they're going to be much better monoclonals. So we're learning a lot. Our understanding of the mechanisms for both small molecules, monoclonals is going to go crazy. But the other thing, which is relatively new, is going to be the various DNA and RNA technologies. And so that is a whole new therapeutic arena and opportunity. I just see that as being a big piece of the future over the next 25 years. And then you roll in, as Dr. G's pointed out, AI. I mean, it's just amazing. I don't think the landscape's going to look the same, maybe even 10 years. But we'll see. The technology to change the natural history of diseases and sometimes find a cure is out there. And not just in our space, but in really all of medicine. I think the fact that the DNA and so the small molecules and monoclonals are pretty much limited to this cell membrane through various receptor actions. These therapies actually get into the cytoplasm, and in the case of CRISPR, actually get into the nucleus of the cell. That just changes everything. I think those are the biggies.
Wow, yeah. I mean, so much has changed since I was diagnosed in 1989 with food allergies. From Benadryl as my number one go-to now being on a biologic, I've definitely been like on the ride of everything that's changed for allergy. So it's definitely exciting to see what's lying ahead for all of us.
Yep. The wonderful thing about medicine, it's constantly evolving. We're constantly learning and needing to keep up. And so that's why resources like the American College of Allergy, Asthma Immunology are really, really important for both clinicians and patients. So thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us and share with us what your vision is. We really appreciate you, and we're looking forward to seeing all the cool things you do.
I sure appreciate the invitation, and I'll be continuing to work in the interest of my fellow clinicians and obviously my patients too. It's been a blessing. I'm very, very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll be seeing you in DC because that is the birthplace of the Itch podcast, actually. So we'll see you there. And I'll definitely make sure to link more information about Capitol Hill Day in our show notes because it is a game changer. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tracy, for joining us.
Thank you, Kortney and Dr. G. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Remember that all information you hear today is for informational purposes only and are not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have a second, help spread the word by rating our podcast and sharing with your friends and family who might also be interested in learning more about allergies, asthma, and immunology. You can always stay up to date by checking out our Instagram, The Itch Podcast, where you can leave questions you are itching to know, or check out our website, which is www.itchpodcast.com, which contains more information about the subjects we covered in today's episode and every episode. Until next time, have a fabulous week.